British design was one of the leaders in pushback against the dominance of an American aesthetic, which had bright, frilly, and transient synthetics. And what the Council of Industrial Design focused on was a more functional design. They sought in 1951 at their opening to have a contemporary style that would be generated by British designers. The Antelope chairs by Ernest Race and Robin Day are minimalist, spare in materials with strong lines. The balls at the base of the chair related to the festival theme of molecular biology. They initiated a sustained propaganda campaign using women's magazines and annual exhibitions sponsored by the newspaper publisher, the Daily Mail. These exhibitions and propaganda efforts attempted, like after the 1851 Crystal Palace exhibition, to instruct the public on good norms for design. Overall, they advocated lightweight, movable, functional units as a basis of good contemporary design. Joe Colombo's total furnishing unit of 1972 is not a COID design, but does show the evolution of functional and sleek aesthetics, which in 1972 is amidst a shift towards postmodernism. But within this unit, the apartment can be a basic, by using this unit, the apartment can be a basic shell, and the customer can purchase their portable unit to accommodate kitchen, bathroom, cupboard, bed, and privacy, and move it to wherever their desired location is. Today, it is still common in Germany to purchase an apartment without a kitchen and to install and remove upon relocation modular cabinets and kitchen appliances. In art, we see people like Richard Hamilton, who was a follower of Duchamp, and here we have the fountain, which is one of his most notorious ready-mades, things that were purchased off the shelf and then exhibited and declared as art. Hamilton was part of this group that looked at popular culture relative to its mass impact and identified several traits. 1 was expendability, 2 was that it was inexpensive, 3, it was mass-produced, and 4, it targeted youth. In his modern apartment, which we see here in the work of art, you see a modern apartment. The inhabitants are a pinup girl with a muscle man mate. There is humor. The barbell is in the shape of a Tootsie Pop with pop on its head as a reference to the movement. The products of mass culture furnish the apartment, and I challenge you to see how many that you can, and how those are also comments on gender and the expectations of women to keep the home perfect and themselves perfect. The window marquee advertises a contemporary event. Al Jolson featured in the movie The Jazz Singer. The technique is a collage on paper, and it's on a fairly large scale. This was also used as the poster for the This Is Tomorrow exhibition. The British are the ones who gave the rise to the term pop art, based on coming out of a 1952 series of 1952 symposia, at which the Smithsons were the core, that looked at popular culture and its implications for art and society in terms of content, medium, transmission of not just visual culture, but youth messages. The Parallel of Art and Life exhibition of 1953 sets up the question of the time. What is the role of art in contemporary culture? It was edited, that's not curated, but edited, by Peter and Alison Smithson, Nigel Henderson, and Sir Eduardo Pelozzi, and the civil engineer Ronald Jenkins. It was a show of 122 photographic panels that came from a range of disciplines and sources, and then they were applied in what seems to be a relatively random fashion all over the surfaces. The ideas here of exhibition are disrupted. They are hung at different levels and angles. Among the leading critics of the time was Rainer Banham, who also wrote From Theory and Design, that's your treatise. He is, or was, sorry, an aformalist, somebody who went against the ideas of formal training. He was anti-classical. One of the things that he did was oppose the abstraction movement that we will see developing in New York. But the way that he sought to do this was through the revelation of the materials, so that the materiality is brought to the prominence. You see that in some of these pieces. Likewise, he believed that the quality of the work is not assessed by or derived from external standards, but rather generated by the medium, whether it's paint, burlap, linen. And this is also an idea that would be in common with that with Annie Albers, who we saw in the previous short lecture, where she looked at the texture of the material. Banham used the term found materials with lineage from Duchamp's ready-made objects. Mies exposed structure, but here an aesthetic of honesty and truth from the materials. He also believed that art should not be governed by external norms or external rules. And this also looks back to Francis Bacon, who described his painting as occurring spontaneously, beginning with a mark and moving from there. Francis Bacon wrote, I was attempting to make a bird alighting on a field, but suddenly the lines that I'd drawn suggested something totally different, and out of this suggestion arose this picture. I had no intention to do this picture. I never thought of it in that way. It was like one continuous accident mounting on top of another. The Parallel of Art and Life exhibit really brought to the foreground the emphasis on the material properties of medium and experimenting with non-art materials. It also had implications for forms of art that Banham did not discuss, such as montage and later pop art that used as subject and medium the material culture of the period. It employed recognizable forms in non-recognizable ways. Paolozzi, in his later more pop-like work, would use prefabricated printed images, visual patterns, and texts. This messaging technique used at the Parallel of Art and Life exhibition is similar to that used by Fluxus, a network of artists that emerged in the early 1960s in the United States, Europe, and Japan. Fluxus Editions, an ambitious publishing program conceived by artist and designer George McEunis, was one of the brainchilds of this group. Multiples are used to be distributed by the artists as a way of disseminating their ideas in a parallel to advertising techniques. They developed the idea of the concept of a flux shop where customers could come buy directly from the artists. The Smithson's association with the pop movement and this concern over expendability extended to their work in architecture. One of their breakthrough pieces was the Hunstanton School in Norfolk, completed in 1954. It was similar in appearance to Mies van der Rohe's early buildings at the IIT campus, such as the Alumni Hall or the Minerals building. They used steel beams, concrete slabs, and blocks and brick. It does not really use recycled objects, which is something that Banham would have appreciated, but seeks rather truth in what you see is not dictated by a superimposed aesthetic choice. The Commission for the Economist brought Smithson into a prestigious client. The Economist is a financial magazine and very important economic institution. The site that was chosen was in the West End of London in St. James Place, a historic neighborhood of vintage buildings. This is much different than we would expect in New York City, where Lever House, for instance, was set among skyscrapers. Like Lever House, this complex had multiple functions. like Le Corbusier's Maison Jaoul, the way that the architects combined these multiple buildings and multiple functions was through multiple buildings, and these buildings were joined underground with a two-story cellar. And then above ground, instead of the courtyard at Maison Jaoul, the above ground link is through the public plaza. There is, throughout this project, the exposure of structural in situ concrete core, a perimeter of precast columns. Within the design, there's also a balanced asymmetry. The shorter building is based on a module that is twice the size of the taller building housing the headquarters. One of the things that they had to figure out with this use of concrete was how to prevent staining. And so there is a system of gutters and sills around the entire complex that prevents the concrete staining. So overall, you have this brutalist aesthetic that is used for a private corporate function plus commercial space.